make a strong argument, you have to have strong evidence. So once you've come up with a thesis statement and you've begun thinking about the reasons for your opinion about your topic, it's time to look at how you'll support those reasons with evidence. So most arguments have these central ingredients. You have an introduction that gives your reader necessary context, background information, and you make an attempt to generally get the reader interested in your topic. But most importantly, your introduction sets forth a strong claim, which might also be referred to as an argumentative thesis statement. Then you've got your body paragraphs, just like with any other essay. But in the case of an argument, what your body paragraphs should emphasize are the reasons why your argument is valuable or correct, the reasons why you believe in your thesis and that you think your reader should too. And then those reasons must also be supported by evidence, because you must gather trust from your reader, and you'll do so by finding credible sources and mining them for valuable evidence. Then, as we'll talk about in another video, you'll want to, before your paper is over, recognize an opposing viewpoint, some kind of idea that might differ from your own. And then you'll want to either concede to it, which is to agree that the other side has a point, or rebut it, which is when you say, okay, wait a minute, you're wrong, and here's why. Now, we'll talk about strategies for doing so in a way that's persuasive and effective, but we'll table that for now. And then, of course, finally, you have a conclusion paragraph, and that is going to sum up your reasons that you've talked about earlier in your paper and try to finally drive home what you want the reader to think or do about the topic you've been arguing. So generally, a structure for this paper might look something like this. Now, this comes out of your textbook, and I think it's a pretty handy chart. And so you introduce your issue, give any background needed, state your thesis, give your first reason, and support it. Give your second reason, support it. Continue as needed, based upon the length of your paper and how much you have to say, address opposing arguments, and then end your paper. Now, you can structure your argument in a different way that you think makes sense and still contains good evidence, but I think that this pattern here is probably a pretty good one to follow for most people, so I would recommend following this path through your argument paper. And that means that once you've come up with your thesis statement and you've come up with reasons that support your thesis statement, you have to go looking for evidence. So let's take a look at one aspect of your paper that we haven't talked about much this semester, but you should have gone over in 1101, and that is logos, pathos, and ethos. These are the rhetorical appeals that we use as writers to make our writing more persuasive. And while you're not going to talk in your paper specifically about logos, ethos, or pathos, you will use these tools in the process of writing your argument. So logos will come from supporting the reasons for your opinion, for your argument, with evidence. Ethos kind of comes out of that too, because your reader will trust you more if you're using evidence that comes from credible sources. And then pathos, which we'll talk more about in another part of the module, that generally comes from how you frame your argument and its reasons and evidence. So you'll think about, probably especially in your introduction and conclusion, how you'll get your reader to care about what you're arguing. How will you make sure that the evidence you've given actually matters to them? And you might think about your writing style, your word choices, ways that you can reach your reader according to their emotions or values. And that's something that I'll devote another video to, but the focus of this one, supporting your reasons with evidence, that applies to logos, which is logic, and ethos, which is credibility. And so these are two things that in an argumentative research paper, you want to emphasize most strongly. So your topic plus your opinion plus your reasons equals your thesis. We've talked about that in a previous video. And so to write a good argumentative thesis statement, you want to add these three ingredients together. Topic in this example is telemedicine. The opinion that we're going to go with is telemedicine is an important development in the healthcare industry and should be adopted by more healthcare providers. What are our reasons for thinking that? In this case, number one, this increases access to care. Number two, telemedicine reduces healthcare costs. And number three, it enhances traditional face-to-face medicine. Now, these are just three reasons out of many. You cannot in your paper cover every single reason why your argument is good or valuable. Settle to maybe 2 to 4 reasons, and that will form your body paragraphs. But right away in your introduction, you want to broadcast to your reader what your paper is going to focus on, and you do that by setting up what you will argue and what reasons you'll be delving into more deeply to support that argument. And so a one-sentence thesis statement would combine those ingredients, and it might look something like this. Telemedicine is an important development in the healthcare industry and should be adopted by more healthcare providers because it increases access to care, reduces healthcare costs, and enhances traditional face-to-face medicine. You could also break this up into 2 sentences potentially. You can have a 2-sentence thesis statement. That's okay. So we could say it this way. Telemedicine is an important development in the healthcare industry. It should be adopted by more healthcare providers because it increases access to care, reduces healthcare costs, and enhances traditional face-to-face medicine. Now, you've set up those reasons in your introduction in that thesis statement, and that sets up a roadmap both for you and your reader because it tells us that you are going to support your thesis by talking about those 3 things. So our introduction gets the reader's attention, sets up the context for telemedicine's, let's say it's increasing popularity right now, and then you provide that thesis statement, topic plus opinion plus reasons for that opinion. Now that means that your first body paragraph is going to address one of those reasons. In this case, let's say this body paragraph is going to be about how telemedicine is good because it increases access to care. So we would come up with a topic sentence that indicates that shows how one of our reasons supports our thesis. And then in the rest of that body paragraph, you are going to explain your reasoning, provide supporting evidence, explain that evidence, and then bring the paragraph to a conclusion. And that will be a pattern that you can follow for pretty much all of your body paragraphs. And so I want to take a look at step by step how we would put together a body paragraph that has good reasoning, good evidence, and is going to be persuasive to your reader. So there are some questions I can ask myself when it comes to building this paragraph. So first I want to come up with some kind of topic sentence, and in this case let's go with increased access to healthcare is one of the primary benefits of telemedicine. So when you look at that topic sentence, you can see a version of my thesis in miniature that telemedicine has benefits, and then you can see one of my reasons for believing that is because I think it increases access to healthcare. Now that means that the rest of my paragraph has to make my reader care about that and then prove that I'm right as well. So first I might ask myself, look at my topic sentence and say, well, why is this reason important? Why does it matter if telemedicine increases access to healthcare? Well, I want to get that across to my reader because they may be neutral when it comes to this issue. Maybe they haven't had to think about healthcare very much in their lives, or they may be antagonistic. They may disagree with me and think telemedicine's a terrible idea. You always want to imagine your reader as someone who either potentially disagrees with you or isn't informed about the topic and you still need to convince them that you're right. And so why is access to healthcare important? Well, my reasoning could be that I think people deserve good healthcare. and that barriers like location and disability shouldn't prevent people from receiving good health care. I want to tell my reader that. Now that they understand why I think this is so important, then my next question that my reader might raise is, well, how do you know? Is that true? Can you prove it? And so then I have to ask myself, what do I need to prove in this paragraph? Well, I need to prove that barriers do exist and that telemedicine can offer solutions to that problem. Because someone who, again, hasn't had a lot of experience with healthcare problems or difficulties, they might not realize that there are barriers that other people experience. So I need to make sure I can prove that. And then if I'm saying telemedicine is the answer, well, then I have to offer proof for that too. And so this gets me to the all-important question. What kind of evidence can I use to prove these things? What kind of research should I conduct? Now, fortunately for you guys, if you're continuing with the same topic from your critique, or at least from your annotated bibliography, you've already been doing research. And you might be able to use some of the information you've already found. You might even have come up with the reasons for your argument because of the research you've already done, which is great. But you'll need to conduct some more research because you need at least 5 sources for this paper, and 2 of them must be scholarly. A good way to figure out a plan for your research is to go through these steps, come up with your reasons why you have your opinion that you're talking about in your paper, build a tentative thesis statement that you might change later, and that's okay, and then start considering how are you going to prove these reasons that you've come up with. Well, that's going to come through research and then deciding what information to actually pull from your research, because you don't want to cite everything you read, obviously. We're not writing a book. And so what I want to take a look at next is, how do we select useful information to include as evidence? And then how do we talk about it? How do we integrate it into our writing?